Welcome to the Federal Appraisal video series. The purpose of our videos is in part to offer alternative presentations to appraisal issues, different from what might be found in traditional appraisal education. The dark store theory has sparked considerable debate in recent years, and several good pieces have been written on the topic in response. This video will present a different set of appraisal concepts that we believe offer an alternative way to approach the dark store debate. Note that we have generalized the concept of the dark store theory and related it to the go-dark hypothesis. In this video, we will investigate the appraisal concepts of the dark store theory and the go-dark hypothesis, and several related concepts, such as the hypothetical sale, inherent in the definition of market value, which we see as being at the heart of the dark store theory and the go-dark hypothesis. To begin, let's lay out the notions behind the dark store theory and the go-dark hypothesis. The word dark refers to a property assumed to be vacant, unoccupied, because the property has no lights on. The dark store theory is typically applied to retail property that's assumed to be vacant, even if it's not, while the go-dark hypothesis assumes that a property of any type is vacant, even if it's not. At its heart, the go-dark hypothesis might be classified as a hypothetical condition, which has a very particular meaning and critical USPAP connotations. Please see our other videos on hypothetical conditions. Suffice it to say, for our purposes in this video, the use of hypothetical conditions is not appropriate in many circumstances, such as in appraisal for property taxation. If an appraiser believes that the go-dark hypothesis is a hypothetical condition as per USPAP, then it would not be an appropriate assumption to apply in an appraisal for property taxation. In fact, some property taxation appraisers are making this mistake. Others utilize the go-dark hypothesis in a different, more subtle way. Historically, the dark store theory arose in property tax appraisal of retail space with tenant-specific improvements, where it was argued that since the store is assumed to be vacant, the previous or current tenant-specific improvements are valueless because they have no use to the next occupant. For example, Home Depot's orange color scheme is valueless to Lowe's, who brands their stores in a blue color scheme. We can generalize these notions to any kind of space. We are increasingly seeing the same underlying arguments made for other property types, such as power plants, refineries, special manufacturing plants, corporate headquarters, and sometimes even general-purpose commercial property types. The key notions of the generalized concept of the go-dark hypothesis are: 1. That the improvements which have value to the current user have reduced or no utility to the next user, and therefore have reduced or no value. And 2, the appraiser is forced to adopt the perspective of the next user following a required hypothetical sale. The go-dark hypothesis has the following underpinnings. It is assumed that, as of the appraisal date, the space is vacant or dark, even though the space is actually occupied. This hypothetical condition may be assumed even if the space is successfully, physically, legally, and profitably occupied, and the current occupant intends to stay. For general-purpose properties, once the go-dark hypothesis is claimed, it then follows that the property must suffer the cost of lease-up efforts, which includes lost income due to vacancy until absorbed, brokerage and marketing expenses, and tenant improvement costs. For special built properties, the go-dark hypothesis additionally claims that these properties are special built for one or only a few specific users. It is assumed that the current occupant no longer wants the space, or otherwise implied that the occupant would not buy, build, rent, or otherwise reoccupy the space. This rationale is for the assumed vacancy. The go-dark hypothesis further assumes that the hypothetical next user does not find value in the property equal to the cost of construction because the next user finds obsolescence in the special built features in that property. Appraisal theory defines this loss in value from the cost of construction as functional or economic obsolescence. So, for example, while it may have cost $10 million to build a special built property, where the special features cost $3 million of the $10 million, it is assumed that the current occupant vacates the property, that the current occupant does not value the special improvements and would not rebuild or rent or reoccupy the space, and the next owner or user will not find value in those special improvements. So therefore, the property suffers substantial functional and/or economic obsolescence, even though the current occupant may actually be utilizing the property as it was intended when it was built. Therefore, under the Godark hypothesis, the property suffers $3 million in functional and/or economic obsolescence. The Godark hypothesis in special built properties may also claim a loss in value for the lost income due to the vacancy until absorbed, brokerage and marketing expenses, and tenant improvement costs. Let's take a look at some examples of the Godark hypothesis for 5 different property types, starting with a national brand retailer under the dark store theory. A national retailer, such as a pharmacy, builds a new building per their specifications, branding, and retailing needs. The property performs as expected, but other retailers would not desire the same features, finishes, and functionality in their buildings. If forced to sell to another user, the current owner would have to write off much of the cost of their branding, designs, finishes, and the functionality in their buildings. The next owner or occupant would consider them useless or obsolete in appraisal terms. That sale price will be substantially lower than the cost to build. But if the current owner desires to immediately replace the building, they would build another at the same level of cost, expecting a return at the same level of income to the company. Frequently, these national retail buildings transact as sale-leasebacks. If transacted based solely on economics and not impacted by atypical tax or financing considerations, then the sale price will be based on the cost to build and the lease rates will be based on the sale price. If the retailer reasonably expects a market rate of return on the cost to build, then the costs to build represent the proper market value. When the appraiser believes that the use by the current user is the highest and best use, then the value implied by the sale-leaseback transaction is a proper market value. It should be noted many sale-leaseback prices and rents are impacted by atypical tax and financing considerations, thus obscuring the market value contribution of the property among the value contributions from the contracts. The sale-leaseback transactions are usually incomparable to the hypothetical sales under the dark store theory because the sale-leaseback usually represents the value to the current user, while the dark store theory assumes a new type of user. Consider a general-purpose office building, fully occupied by one credit-rated tenant who intends to stay in the space long-term and in a market with high vacancy requiring multi-year absorption periods. Applying the Godark hypothesis would require that the value be reduced substantially as compared to the value based on the actual income stream based on the fully occupied building. A lease agreement is an intangible asset. Further, property taxation is generally based on the assumption of a fee-simple ownership, not lease fee. On its face, the Godark hypothesis would appear to be appropriate. Consider an owner-occupied auto assembly plant that was built to suit by the owner-occupant who is satisfied with the investment and intends to stay long-term. The property is located in a market with a high number of old vacant auto assembly plants. There are markets, such as in Michigan, where vacant car plants frequently sell for 5% to 15% of their cost of build. At the same time, and in the same market, car manufacturers regularly build and occupy new plants. Applying the Godark hypothesis would require the value be substantially reduced from the value based on the actual costs of build. Next, let's consider corporate headquarters. These properties often resemble campuses and boast special locations, improvements, and finishes that reflect the status of the corporation and its specific philosophies. Such intangible qualities may not create value for any other corporation that might otherwise buy or occupy a corporate headquarters type of property. Further, to achieve these specific corporate qualities, the cost to build corporate headquarters are frequently substantially higher than the values of other good quality offices in the vicinity. As a result, if we were to assume that a corporate headquarters were to go dark, the value of any special improvements, super adequate finishes, or features would be lost. Further, if the office market is oversupplied, additional value would be lost in lease-up expenses. Finally, consider a power plant. In a regulated electricity market, in equilibrium or oversupplied market, where there are currently no buyers for such a plant, but where the current owner, a regulated utility, is receiving adequate income from the plant sufficient to justify its original costs. If forced to sell the plant, the current owner would sell to an independent or merchant power producer for substantially less than the value in use to the current owner. Merchant power prices are currently significantly lower than regulated prices, which are based on costs, and merchant power producers would not likely be able to generate income sufficient to justify the purchase price equal to the physically depreciated cost of the plant. If given the choice, the current owner would not sell the plant. If there were a need to liquidate assets within the regulated utility, then the utility company would likely not sell individual plants, but would sell the corporate division or the entire company in order to preserve the regulated income stream from the plant and preserve the value based on the original cost. If we apply the Godard hypothesis, then we are required to assume only merchant power producers would buy the plant, and that they would buy at a liquidation price. This circumstance does not meet the definition of market value and would better be defined as a sale under duress. While the purpose of this video is to demonstrate the misapplication of the Godard hypothesis, there are occasions where the Godard hypothesis is valid. In my career, I first encountered the Godard hypothesis when doing appraisals for financing purposes, where the lenders required two types of value. One, the value under actual occupancy conditions. This is an as-is appraisal. Two, the second value was under a Godard hypothesis. This was an as-if appraisal, an appraisal assuming the hypothetical condition, as if the property were vacant. Together, the two values offer important information to the lender during their loan underwriting process. Imagine the following circumstances. Obviously, Building 1 presents greater investment risk than Building 2, even though both have the same as-is market value. Knowing both of these types of values helps lenders make decisions regarding the value and the risk entailed. In this case, the lender will benefit from understanding that the leases in Building 1 are likely above market rates. So how does the Godard hypothesis arise within property taxation? With lending appraisals, the goal of the client is to reduce risk and maximize value. The Godard hypothesis lets financing analysts measure exposure or lack thereof to downside risks. Within property taxation, property owners wish to demonstrate higher risk and minimize taxable value. For example, if the as-is analysis is based on the sales comparison approach and indicates values of $10 million for both buildings, but one building has much lower Godard value, then it may be that more analysis would be necessary via additional adjustments to the sales comparison approach or via an income approach or cost approach in order to reconcile to a value that reflects the downside risk revealed by the Godard analysis. The Godard hypothesis can be an argument for lower appraised values and tax assessments when they reveal flaws in the as-is appraisal. This concludes part 1 of this two-part video. Click here to jump to part 2, where we will talk about the application of the Godard hypothesis and the hypothetical sale as defined in appraisals. See you there.